Hello and welcome to the new season of the Drawn and Redrawn, the Making of India's Internal Boundaries podcast. This is a part of a larger India State Stories project that explores the evolution of India's political and administrative boundaries. This project is an undertaking by the Centre for Legislative Education and Research at Flame University in Pune. In this new season, we embark on a journey through the fascinating histories and narratives of each Indian state and union territories, exploring the pivotal events, influential personalities, and societal transformations that have shaped the subcontinent. In the 31st episode, we see how the most populous state of Uttar Pradesh came into existence. This episode is based on a corresponding article written by our team at India State Stories. These articles have been converted to audio conversations with the help of Google's Notebook LM. You can find the relevant article link in the show notes. Now, let's dive into the conversation.
Okay, let's start today with a little thought experiment.
Right.
I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh decided to break away. Just declared itself a sovereign nation tomorrow morning.
Okay, I'm with you.
Where do you think it would land on the global leaderboard?
It would be an absolute titan. I mean, purely in terms of population. If Uttar Pradesh or UP were a country, it would be the fourth largest nation in the world.
Fourth. That is actually mind-boggling.
It is.
We are talking about a single state inside India that is bigger than Brazil, bigger than Pakistan, bigger than Nigeria.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just a head count. Because of that sheer demographic weight, it holds this massive center of gravity in Indian politics.
Right.
There's that old adage in Delhi political circles, the road to the prime minister's chair goes through Lucknow. It has 80 Lok Sabha seats. It is the undeniable political powerhouse of the subcontinent.
But see, that is usually where the conversation stops. So we look at the size, we look at the seat count, and we treat UP as the static monolithic block on the map. But the stack of sources we are digging into today paints a completely different picture. It suggests that this monolith is actually, well, an illusion.
It really is. If you look at the historical maps, the government orders, the Heed debates from the 1940s, what you see is that UP is a shapeshifter.
It is shapeshifting.
It is a living map.
I love that phrase, living map.
It fits perfectly. Over the last 150 years, this region has undergone constant surgery. I mean, the borders have been drawn and erased, the names have been changed to rewrite history, and the internal structure is just fractured like glass.
So it went from a messy patchwork of British territories and princely states to the powerhouse we see today.
Exactly.
So the mission for this deep dive is to trace that journey. We aren't just looking at geography here. We are looking at how power, inscribes itself on the land.
And how do you govern a region that is effectively a country?
And looking at the data, the big question is, are we done? Or is the map of UP going to break apart again?
That is the big question. But to answer it, we have to unroll the map. And not the one on your phone. We need to rewind the clock.
Let's do it. Let's go back to the colonial era. Let's say post-1857. The British have just suppressed the Great Revolt. They are tightening their grip. What does the map look like then?
It looks like a mess.
Or, from the British perspective in Calcutta, it looked like a frontier. At that time, most of this region was brought under direct British control, but they didn't call it Uttar Pradesh.
No.
They called it the Northwest Province.
Which is always so confusing when you see it in history books. I mean, if you look at a map of India today, UP is very much north-central. It's the heartland.
It is today. But you have to put yourself in the shoes of a British officer sitting in Calcutta, which was the capital back then.
Oh, okay.
From their vantage point, this region was the northwest frontier of their immediate empire. Everything is about perspective.
Fair point. So we have the Northwest Province, but the recognizable shape of the modern state doesn't really form until later, right? The notes mention Lord Curzon in 1902. That is the pivotal moment. 1902. The colonial administration forms what they called the United Province of Agra and Oudh.
United Province. Okay, I'm seeing where the UP abbreviation starts to sneak in.
That is the origin story. But I want you to flag the word united. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting there. This wasn't a solid block of territory. It was more like Swiss cheese.
Swiss cheese.
Yes. You had the British-administered territories, which formed the main block of cheese, but dotted inside them, like the holes, were these distinct princely states.
Right. I was looking at the list in the source material. You have places like Rampur and Terry Garhwal. These weren't under the British district magistrate.
Not directly, no. They maintain their own royal lineages. Rampur is a classic example, a significant Muslim princely state surrounded by British territory. Terry Garhwal in the mountains was another.
So they were just autonomous pockets of local rule floating inside the larger British province. But the one that really stood out to me in the research was Benares. The story of Benares and the source material is honestly a bit confusing. It seems like it was split down the middle.
Benares is a fascinating case study in colonial awkwardness. It shows just how arbitrary these lines could be.
Okay.
So for a long time, the region was under direct British control. But then in 1911, the British decided to elevate the Narayan dynasty. They granted them the status of a princely state with a 13-gun salute.
A 13-gun salute, that's a serious upgrade, so they get their kingdom back.
Well, sort of, and this is the catch.
Yeah.
The British only gave them specific parts of the territory. So you had the state of Benares, which consisted of 2 disjointed enclaves, Chakia and parts of Badohi.
So not a solid block.
Not at all. But the city of Benares itself, the actual urban center, the Ghats, the population hub, that stayed under British administration.
That sounds like an administrative nightmare. You could practically cross the street and be in a different jurisdiction.
Essentially, yes. It created a very complex jurisdictional map where sovereignty wasn't about a continuous block of land, but about specific patches of revenue and authority. It was a patchwork quilt where the patches didn't quite match.
And looking at the maps from the Central India Agency in the archives, it gets even weirder on the southern border. You have these tiny places, Charkari, Sarila, Bayoni, Beri, Jigni.
Names that have largely faded from the modern political consciousness.
Exactly. I've never even heard of some of these.
Well, these were small princely states that were historically managed by the Central India Agency, which handled the states in what is now Madhya Pradesh.
Oh, right.
They were culturally part of the Bundelkhand region, but geographically, they were embedded in the UP landscape.
So when 1947 comes around and India becomes independent, what happens to these little islands?
The logic of spatial continuity takes over. That is the technical term used in the integration documents. Basically, the new Indian government looked at the map and said, we cannot govern a jigsaw puzzle.
It's just not practical.
Not at all. Even though these places had different administrative histories, they were physically closer to the UP administration. So places like Jigni and Sarila were folded into the UP districts of Hamirpur and Jalone.
So it was a massive consolidation exercise, just smoothing out the edges.
Precisely. And that brings us to the biggest identity crisis of 1947. The British are gone. The map is being consolidated. But the name is still United Provinces.
Which I imagine didn't sit well with the freedom fighters. It sounds like a corporation, not a state. United Provinces, it's very functional.
It was deeply unpopular. It felt bureaucratic and imperial. It didn't reflect the culture, the history, or the soul of the people living there.
So they needed a new name.
Almost immediately. And this is one of my favorite parts of the research, the debate in 1949.
Oh, this section was wild. The suggestions weren't just tweaks, they were swinging for the fences.
The chief minister at the time, G.B. Pant, he had a very specific vision, didn't he?
He did. G.B. Pant was a heavyweight figure in Indian politics, and his proposal was to rename the state Aryavarta. Aryavarta. That is heavy. Land of the Aryans. It's Sanskrit, it's epic, it sounds like something out of the Mahabharata.
It is extremely grand, and that was exactly why it failed.
Really? I would have thought that would be popular.
It triggered a massive backlash in the Constituent Assembly. There was a member named Rustam K. Sidhwa, a representative from the Central Provinces, who stood up and vehemently opposed it.
What was his argument?
His argument was very sharp. He said that by claiming the name Aryavarta, this one state was trying to cast itself as the supermost province of India.
Ah, I see. It's like claiming you are the real India and everyone else is just a satellite.
Exactly. It felt exclusionary. It implied a dominance over the other emerging linguistic states like Bengal or Madras.
Yeah.
It was seen as arrogant.
So if Aryavarta is too arrogant and United Provinces is too colonial, how on earth did they land on Uttar Pradesh?
Pragmatism. Pure, unadulterated pragmatism.
Okay.
They needed a name that shed the colonial baggage, meant northern province, but, and this is the key insight from the archives, they wanted to keep the initials UP.
Wait, are you serious? The decision hinged on the abbreviation.
In large part, yes. Think about the bureaucracy. The name United Provinces had been used for decades. The abbreviation UP was painted on thousands of train wagons, stamped on millions of files, engraved on government buildings. It was in the public consciousness.
So it was a cost-saving measure. Let's just keep the logo and change the company name.
It's a bit like a corporate rebrand, isn't it? By choosing Uttar Pradesh, they could Indianize the full name while keeping the brand recognition of UP. It was the path of least resistance.
That is hilarious. But the notes mentioned there was also a social dimension to this. Some people actually wanted to keep the old name United Provinces.
Yes, and this is a nuance that often gets lost. We assume everyone hated the colonial names, but for many, United Provinces had become a symbol of Hindu-Muslim unity.
A neutral name.
Exactly, a neutral administrative umbrella. There was a genuine fear that a new Sanskritized name might disrupt that delicate social fabric. But eventually, the initials compromise won out.
So 1950 rolls around. We have Uttar Pradesh. We have a name, but we still have a problem. The state is gigantic.
Too big, some would argue. Almost immediately after independence, the realization set in that UP was simply too large to manage effectively.
And this brings us to B.R. Ambedkar. Now, usually, when we talk about Ambedkar, we are talking about the Constitution or Dalit rights. But I was surprised to see he had very strong views on the map of UP.
He did. In 1955, Ambedkar advocated for the trifurcation of Uttar Pradesh. He wanted to split it into 3 separate states.
3 states, that would have completely changed the map of India.
It would have. His argument was about governance and representation. He felt that a state with such a massive, diverse population would be ungovernable as a single unit. He worried about the concentration of political power. He basically asked, can a single chief minister in Lucknow really look after the interests of someone in the Himalayas and someone in Bundelkhand at the same time?
That sounds incredibly prescient. So why didn't it happen? Why did G.B. Pant and the others block it?
Politics and language. G.B. Pant was adamant about keeping the Hindi heartland intact. He saw a unified UP as the anchor of Hindi-speaking India. Breaking it up might have diluted that cultural and political bloc.
He wanted UP to be the heavyweight champion.
And he got his wish. But keeping it together came at a cost, right? Especially for the people in the mountains.
Absolutely. This leads us to the first major fracture in the map. The hill districts, places like Nainital, Almora, Garhwal, had a completely different geography and culture compared to the plains of Lucknow or Allahabad.
The Grain Bowl versus the Himalayas.
Exactly. The people in the hills felt completely neglected. They argued that their specific developmental needs, roads and difficult terrain, distinct agricultural patterns, were invisible to a government sitting in the flatlands.
And this gave rise to a movement.
The sources mention the Uttarakhand Kranti Dal, the UKD.
Right. The UKD spearheaded the movement for autonomy. They were fighting for recognition that one size fits all. Governance doesn't work when half your state is vertical. Later, the BJP threw its support behind this movement as well.
And that fight lasted decades.
It did. It finally culminated on November 9, 2000. The map of UP changed drastically. 13 hill districts were carved out to create the new state of Uttarakhand.
So UP lost its crown, so to speak. The mountains were gone. You would think, okay, the state is smaller now, maybe the map will stabilize. But the research shows the exact opposite happened. The external borders stopped moving, but the internal borders went crazy.
District Tetris. That is the only way to describe it.
The numbers are startling. In 1951, the state had 51 districts. Today, even after losing the 13 districts to Uttarakhand, it has 75. That is a massive increase.
It is. And if you look at the timeline, there was this absolute explosion in the 1990s. Between 1991 and 2001, 16 new districts were carved out in just that one decade.
16? That's more than one a year. Why? Was the population just growing that fast that they needed more administrators?
Population was part of it, certainly. Smaller districts are theoretically easier to govern. We see this even now, like the temporary Mahakumbh district created in Prayagraj in 2024 just to manage the festival crowds. That makes administrative sense.
But the 90s explosion.
That was largely political.
This was the era of coalition politics and caste mobilization.
Exactly. This was a volatile time in UP politics. You had the rise of parties asserting the identity of specific caste groups. And creating a new district is a powerful tool for patronage.
How so?
Well, when you create a new district, you aren't just drawing a line. You are creating a new center of power. You're creating jobs, contracts, construction projects for the new headquarters.
Right.
But crucially, it allows you to consolidate specific vote banks. If a certain caste group is dominant in a subregion, making it a district gives them political weight. It brings the administration closer to your voters.
So it's basically, vote for me and I'll give you your own district.
In many cases, yes. Look at the specific examples. Kanpur got split into Kanpur Dehad, which means rural, and Kanpur Nagar urban.
A rural-urban divide.
Precisely. Ghaziabad was carved out of Bulandshahr.
And Amethi, that one is famous.
Amethi is the classic VIP constituency. It was carved out of Raebareli and Sultanpur. Why? To give a high-profile political family a dedicated administrative fiefdom where they could direct development funds without interference. Each of these lines on the map represents a political negotiation.
And it's not just the lines changing, it's the names on the signs. This name change game seems to be a favorite pastime of UP governments.
It is the most visible battleground today. If the 90s were about carving out districts, the last decade has been about renaming them.
The list is long. Benares to Varanasi, Allahabad to Prayagraj, Faizabad to Ayodhya.
These aren't just administrative updates like United Provinces to Uttar Pradesh. These are cultural statements.
It feels like a reclamation project.
It is. The government is explicitly prioritizing one layer of history over another. When you change Allahabad to Prayagraj, you are saying the Mughal history is an imposition. The ancient Vedic confluence of rivers is the real identity. It's about signaling to the voter base whose heritage matters.
But sometimes it just seems, well, a bit chaotic. The case of Hathras actually made me laugh a little. It's like a game of ping pong.
It really is. So Hathras was renamed Mahamayan between 2001 and 2011. This was during the tenure of a chief minister who wanted to honor a specific Dalit icon.
Okay, standard practice, new government, new icons.
But then the government changed in 2012, and what did they do? They changed it back to Hathras.
Talk about whiplash for the locals. Where do you live? Well, check the election results.
Precisely. And the data shows this trend is accelerating. Between 2011 and 2021, there were 6 major name changes. It suggests that the map of UP is becoming a primary billboard for the culture wars.
You can't always change the economy overnight.
But you can change the signs on the highway.
It's fascinating because when we look at a map, we think of it as objective reality. But this deep dive proves that the map of UP is anything but objective. It's a diary of power struggles.
That is a beautiful way to put it. From the Northwest Province, which centered the British in Calcutta, to the debate over Aryavarta, to the splitting of the mountains and the endless fracturing of districts, every single line and label tells a story of who was in charge and what they valued.
So let's zoom out. We have gone from colonial exits to identity struggles to political strategy. UP is now a 75-district powerhouse.
And it is the demographic engine of India. The way UP is governed, divided, and named matters for the entire country.
So here is the question I want to leave our listeners with. We have seen how much this map has changed in just 70 years to manage population and politics. The lines are clearly not written in permanent ink.
No, history tells us the ink is never permanent.
So looking forward, what does the map of Uttar Pradesh look like 50 years from now? With the population continuing to grow, can it remain one state?
That is the ultimate question of Indian federalism. Can a state be too big to succeed?
Do you think B.R. Ambedkar's ghost will finally get his way? Will we see that trifurcation or even a quadrifurcation return to the table?
It's entirely possible. You still have distinct regions like Bundelkhand, Purvanchal, and Western UP, all with very different economic needs. As the population swells, the pressure to break it up to make it manageable will likely return. The map isn't done shifting yet.
Something to think about the next time you look at a map of India. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the shape-shifting map of UP. We'll catch you on the next one.